So long to normality, Scene 5. Something I had not thought about when I had accepted Nugget's offer to give me a ride home was that Pa would not like the idea of me riding with a stranger, even if it was one of my classmates. I think it was Bassett that bothered my Pa the most. The instant the screen door slammed shut, Pa grabbed hold of my chin so that I was forced to look up into his eyes. I could tell by the way he was talking that Pa was working up a good mad, as he asked me, "What in the Sam Hill were you thinking getting into a strange car?" When I didn't reply, he sent me to my room. I am kind of embarrassed to say, but I got 5 whacks with Pa belt after he'd let me stew for about an hour in my room. During that hour I sat on the side of Christopher's bed and looked out the window at the bad clouds working their way over the farm. It weren't too long till it was raining like a cow peeing on a flat rock. I seen Vincent running around looking so lost I betcha he didn't know if he was afoot or on horseback. It took a minute or two for me to realize he wasn't just running around in the rain, he was trying to catch Stonewall, Kristen's prize rooster that she done had since he was just an egg. Near about every time a storm works up, Stonewall somehow gets loose and runs around in the rain, till he's plum-drenched and looking about as big as a bar of soap after a day's washing. I reckon that Vincent ended up wet and muddy for Newton, seeing how a big clap of thunder done scared Stonewall right back into the hen house, leaving poor Vincent standing in the rain looking madder than a wildcat. And if that ain't true, grits ain't groceries, eggs ain't poultry, and Mona Lisa was a man. I watched until Vincent went into the barn, then I got up and went over to my own bed. I'd no sooner sat myself back down when I heard Pa coming into the house. From downstairs Pa could be heard, "I reckon we needed the rain. It's been so dry the trees have been breathing the dogs." It weren't long after that he finally came up upstairs. As he stepped into my room, Pa wrinkled up his nose and asked, "You needed changed?" Between worrying what Pa was going to do to me and watching Vincent chase after Stonewall in the rain, I'd not even noticed that I'd gone and messed the back of my britches. I ain't sure when I'd done it. Maybe when Pa had grabbed a hold of my chin he'd done scared me so bad I'd messed myself. I just ain't sure. The way Pa looked down at me just then made me feel ashamed of myself. Without another word he stripped me out of my school uniform and had me lie down on my bed while he unpinned my diaper. However, when he saw the mess he decided to pin my diaper back into place until he got me into the bathtub. Now, it ain't very often that Pa gives me a bath. Mostly he just hollers for me to hurry up or to stop playing around and get out of the tub. This time something told me that he was not happy, and when he started scrubbing my back with the old horse brush I knew he was plumb angry. The bristles hurt like fire and I didn't want to, but I started to cry. Even when he snapped his fingers in front of my nose and said, "Dry it up," I couldn't, cause I knew what was coming after my bath. Back in my room we found Vincent standing in the middle of the room stark naked, while dripping rain and mud on the floor. "What happened to you?" Pa asked when he seen that Kyle Lee's hair looked as though he was wearing a mud helmet. "Pa, I reckon one of these days you're going to have to tan me good, cause I am going to wring Stonewall's feather-covered neck," Vincent said angrily while leaning over to pick up his muddy clothes. The two of them looked at the puddle of rain and mud on the floor, but Vincent spoke up before Pa could say anything about it. "I'll clean it up soon as I have a wash, Pa," he said, sounding as though he was still mean. Pa made a humorous grunt in a sound. Did YA at least catch him? Vincent looked up at Pa just about as wound up as I'd ever seen him. He clenched his teeth together and groaned. The dang storm done scared him back in. As he was leaving for the bathroom he did something that struck me as odd. Without being told, Vincent pulled the door to our room closed, leaving Pa and me alone. Pa then returned his attention to me, standing before him wearing nothing but a yellow flowered towel and trembling with fright. "You know why you're about to get a whoop in?" Pa asked. "But Pa, it weren't no stranger, it was my friend Nugget from school." I tried to explain. I could tell Pa was struggling to keep a lid on his temper. "What's the rule about other people's cars?" I swallow hard against the lump in my throat. "We ain't never supposed to get into someone's car unless you or Ma says that it's okay, sepping for the sheriff or the preacher." Pa leaned over so that we were at eye level, did you have permission to ride home from school with your friend? I tried to fight the tears from coming, but I couldn't hold them back any longer. Now sobbing, I tried to make Pa understand, but what I meant to say and what actually came out of my mouth were not the same. I meant to say, but Pa, he is my school's president, but what I said was, but Pa, he is my present. The perplexed look on PA's face was almost humorous. He stood upright while still looking down on me. The anger in his face cracked momentarily and allowed just a hint of a smile to show through. He reached up, pulled off his hat and ran his fingers through his hair. You want to run that one by me again? I shook my head and tried again, but only managed to muck it up even more. School, wet mist, no hand. Pa placed a hand on my shoulder and pushed me down until I was sitting on my bed. He then sat down next to me, wrapped his big arms around me and allowed me to cry. I buried my face into his damp shirt and didn't realize it until later that he must have been caught out in the rain too. When Pa thought I had just about got all my tears out, he said, "Would you like to try once more, son?" I sniffled before speaking, "I'm sorry, Pa. I shouldn't have done it. I should have called for permission first, huh?" "I reckon so," he said softly. I felt his hand on the back of my head as he asked, "What's this about a present?" I wiped my nose with the back of my hand. "Nugget, that's the boy I came home with. He's the president of my school and his dad is some important government man." "President, huh?" Pa said. Almost breaking down again, I said, "I'm sorry, Pa. I won't never do it again." I felt his chest swell as he took in a deep breath. "Well, I reckon you won't, but that don't quite settle up for what YA done wrong now, does it?" I had to pull away slightly so that I could look into his eyes and was going to say something but didn't. "Don't you think you need to be punished for doing what you knew to be wrong?" My head wanted to twist from side to side, but instead it bobbed up and down in agreement. He stood up, told me to take off my towel and lay face first on my bed. I couldn't see it coming. I only heard a swoosh as Pa whipped his belt from the loops in his pants with one tug. The first lash stung so bad that I couldn't help but to cry out. Now when Pa tans someone, he don't do it fast, he gives YA a swat then waits. Sometimes he only waits a few seconds to allow the stinging to get into your head, and other times, like now, he waits a really long time between each lashing of the belt. Just as I started to think that I was only going to get one hit with his belt, I heard the belt cut in through the air again. I didn't have time to tense up my bare butt cheeks before his belt made contact. I screamed and cried out, "I am sorry, Pa. I won't ever do it again." I don't remember doing it, but I guess I'd put my hands behind me to protect my backside, cause when the third lashing came it got both of my hands right across my fingers. It hurt so bad that he didn't have to tell me to move them, cause I already had them tucked under my chest and could feel my fingers throbbing with fire. Later that night, Benjamin told me that he heard Pa telling Ma that he had to give me 2 extra licks. One cause I put my hands in the way, and one more cause I did not cry with the 4th whack. As Pa was leaving, he said, "I love you, Nevada." "I love you too, Pa," I managed to say between my sobs. I remember thinking to myself how peculiar it was that Pa just left the way he did. He didn't offer to help me get re-diapered or nothing. He just left me lying necked on my bed and crying into my pillow. When Ma came in, she found me still lying on my belly and blowing on my fingers to try and cool the stinging. When Ma asked me to turn over so that she could pin me into another diaper, I said that I didn't think I could. So she let me stay as I was while she smeared cream all over my bottom. It felt so good, and it took almost all the fire out of both of my cheeks quicker than a Sunday sermon on Super Bowl Sunday. Once Ma was sure that none of the cloth diaper was sticking out past the plastic pants, she took my hand and walked me downstairs for supper. Supper was a kind of rerun of breakfast, except we were eating fried cabbage and buttered noodles. Both Pa and Christopher were once again absent. When Connie tried to ask where they were, Ma simply told her to mind her plate. Unlike breakfast, we did not sit in silence, but instead everyone was quizzing me about my new friend and the long white car. If Pa had been there, none of them would have dared say anything about it, cause they all knew I'd got tan something awful because of it all. Vincent was the first to ask and everyone watched to see how Mom would react. When she picked up her iced tea and took a sip, they took it as a sign that it was okay to ask me about the fancy car. My backside was still heated up quite a bit. I suppose that sitting on the wooden chair at the dinner table didn't help it none, even though I did have my very own cushion wrapped around my bottom. I was relieved to be distracted from the pain, and to be honest I was dying inside to tell someone all about it. I purposefully left out the part about Nugget's hand and about how Bassett cussed. I knew Ma would not like the parts about the bad language, and somehow it didn't seem right to be telling tales about Nugget and his fake hand. After supper, when all the dishes had been washed and everyone's chores and homework were completed, most all of us had gathered in the front room. The rain was still coming down pretty hard outside. Vincent had taken another spill in the mud after supper and had to go upstairs to take another bath. Connie and Ma were working on a new quilt for the new baby still in Ma's belly. Benjamin was sitting at Connie's feet reading a Spider-Man comic book he had traded for at school, while Catherine, Kristen, and me were playing Go Fish. Catherine was accusing Vincent of cheating when Christopher walked in with his girl Megjin on his arm. Christopher had the goofiest grin on his face, sort of like a cat that just had a 3-mouse dinner and a goldfish for dessert. Ma, this is, Christopher started to introduce Megjin. Seeing how Ma is 8 months pregnant, it took some doing for her to get up, but once she was up she said, "My goodness Megjin, you are just as beautiful as ever," and wrapped her arms around Megan's neck. Christopher no longer looked like that fat cat, now he looked more like a fish out of water. When Ma let go of Megjin and seen how white Christopher had gone, she just smiled and said, "Do you really think your own mother wouldn't know when her son had fallen head over heels for a girl?" But Christopher stalled for words. The three of them vanished into the kitchen, and though we tried to eavesdrop on them, Connie wasn't having none of it. Without use realizing it, she'd got up and with a crack had boxed Carl Lee's ears, 'cause he'd been the closest to her. "Ooh ow. What'd YA do that for?" he complained. "You just never mind what they are saying, and that goes for the rest of you too." Vincent was cradling his offended ears with his hands and puckering out his bottom lip. He looked like a wounded puppy with his tail stuck between his legs. Connie couldn't do anything about it when we heard Ma squeal, "My precious boy is getting married." Up until this point it had not occurred to me that the entire time I had been sitting on the edge of the sofa wearing nothing but a diaper and a pair of blue rubber pants with green turtles on them. All of us had got up and rushed into the kitchen. Catherine and Connie screeched at the same time, "Married," and nearly tackled Christopher when they tried to hug on him. I heard Benjamin ask Megjin, "Does this mean you are going to be my sister?" Vincent had forgot about his ears and was standing on one of the chairs giving Christopher a double thumbs up. Everyone was so happy, except for me. I'd suddenly become very much aware of my appearance and was looking about for something, anything to cover myself with. The only thing I could find was the new baby quilt, which Connie had left draped over the armrest of Ma's rocking chair. In a flash I had snatched it up and started wrapping it around me. Kristen seen me with the quilt and attempted to wrestle it away from me. "That is not yours, that is for the new baby," she grunted as she pulled. There was a tearing sound and Kristen went toppling backward into Catherine, and I stumbled backward and fell into Ma's chair like a bag of taters. That is when I felt an awful pain in my backside, like I'd just got stung by a yellow jacket. I jumped right back up and to my alarm found one of Ma's knitting needles was sticking precariously out of the back of my diapered bottom. Aside from Catherine, Kristen, and myself, the others were totally unaware of our little tiff because they were all caught up in the news of Christopher and Megan's marriage news. Catherine, unaware that I'd been hurt, grabbed the half of the quilt that Kristen had ended up with before coming over and snatching away the other half from me. It was then that she'd realized that the quilting needle had gone through the quilt, my rubber pants, and into my diaper. She started to laugh, and she weren't quiet about it either. She was so loud that she sounded like one of those laughing dog things at the zoo. Christopher was the first to come to my aid. "Little pants. What did you do this time?" he said. Before I could stop him, he had took hold of the knitting needle and yanked it out. He then got a good look at my face. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked in a kinder tone. That was the last I remembered until waking up, face down on the kitchen table. "Oh, there he is." I heard Doc Wilson say, "No, now you just lie still and let me get this last stitch into your plump little pride," and he punctuated it with a self-indulgent giggle. "I'd say by the look of things you've been gettin' out of line again," and with a playful swat, which I didn't find amusin' at all, he added, "There we go. I'd normally tell you to keep off that for a while, but by the looks of things, I'd guess you weren't goin' to be usin' it for a couple of days none anyway." And he giggled to himself again. "So how are the diapers working out?" I heard him asking and thought he was asking me, but just as I started to open my mouth I heard Ma speak from down by my feet. "Oh, just fine. It's nice not to have to wash sheets and clothes every day," she said furtively and then asked, "Will he be okay?" "Oh sure," Doc Wilson said and paused briefly, "but I'm afraid he's going to have to learn to live with." He paused again, only this time long enough for me to panic and shout, "What?" "Well, I fixed the puncture wound, but I'm sorry to say you cracked it right in half," he said and chucked at his own joke. I heard Mom sniffle a snort. "That ain't funny," I grumbled. Doc Wilson gave the back of my thigh a squeeze and aid, "Bring him in to see me in a week or so and I'll take out them stitches." Somewhere out of my line of sight I heard Connie ask, "Can I get him ready for bed now?" "Well, it might be better to allow him to sleep all natural if you get my mean," Doc said, and pulling on my big toe to let me know he was once again addressing me he continued, "And you might want to sleep on your belly tonight, Nevada." As I suddenly remembered how I'd ended up in this predicament I felt myself flush red with embarrassment. "Oh, see there. That there is what we in the medical profession call a severe case of wounded pride," Doc said, poking fun at my apparent embarrassment. Mom spoke up, "Connie, take him up and put him in his bed." When Connie left our bedroom, Vincent and Benjamin started in on me. "Remember, Nevada, the Bible says to turn the other cheek," Vincent said. I bit my pillow to keep from responding. I knew if I did it would only egg them on. Benjamin was next. It kind of looked like a big marshmallow on a stick for roasting. I bit into my pillow harder. With a chuckle, Vincent added, "Oh yeah, I get your point." They both laughed and Benjamin came up with another, "I wonder what will happen when he farts." "He'll probably sound like Ma's tea kettle," Vincent said. We heard the screen door close and a minute or two later we could hear a car driving away. My brothers were firing off one pun after another until Ma came in and shut them both up with a threat that she'd tell Pa if they didn't leave me alone. While Ma sat on the edge of my bed and stroked the back of my hair, I quietly sobbed into my pillow until I fell asleep.